Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge, a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services focusing on the Port of Anchorage and the major commercial participants in the Cook Inlet region, providing customers with marine services specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 27th of April. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local forecast and alert information from the National Weather Service. You can do that easily by going to weather.gov/Alaska, calling us on the weather info line at 800-472-0391. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube during the day. Of course, in the late afternoon, you'll get your daily afternoon map briefing. Some of the slides or images that you'll see here in just a moment are the same ones you'll find on YouTube. We'll give you the brief narration that talks you through the weather to come for the next 2.5 days or so, just like we do here on Alaska Weather. So a little bit of a sneak peek. Here's what's going on with breakup. As many of you know, especially if you're in the interior or along some of the main rivers, it really seems like we're kind of mushing things out right now. So interesting time to be had there along the Tanana Valley and along Nikolai and some of the other areas upstream. Really slow changes as we slowly get rid of the river ice, but no major issues to report at this point. You'll see no warnings, a lot of black dots. That means a lot of good things happening right now for breakup. This is the latest update from the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. If you want to see this for yourself, read the narrative that goes along with this map and give you all the nitty-gritty details for your village or any of the other villages listed on the map. You can do that by going to aprfc.arh.noaa.gov. And every time we get a new report from you, the folks there at the River Forecast Center will update this image and incorporate that into the forecast and any concerns they have up or downstream for your community and all of the others again. So very important to get that information during Alaska's breakup season. Now, on the other side of that are the dry conditions that are developing across many locations. Along the Matanuska Valley, high fire danger continues there and also across parts of the interior, a little bit north and west of the Fairbanks region there. So we're watching some areas, but no major or critical concerns right now due to the weather. But every time the humidity drops and the wind comes up or we start to develop thunderstorms, as it looks like we've had some buildup across some of the central and western Yukon late today of at least some towering cumulus clouds. Not so sure about the thunderstorms, but as we get into the end of the spring and early summer, of course, that threat is going to grow. So we're going to be more careful of watching for these fire danger concerns around here as we are moving into one of the drier parts of the season. So always a good time to be fire-wise. Review your fire safety levels around your home, school, church, and business, and do your part before we get into the worst of the season. Now, here's a look out west. What is the weather pattern doing this Monday? As we look out across the eastern sections of Asia and the western Pacific, you can easily see a big fetch of moisture coming in here. This is the jet stream that's working off of Asia, and it's really staying mainly south of Alaska. It has some crests and valleys as it kind of meanders across the Pacific. That is keeping most of Alaska and the Bering Sea really out of that main superhighway of weather. So we get zones of low pressure across the Bering that aren't really moving in with any great haste one way or the other. We will see a kind of a wave of low pressure work out of the Bering and gradually drift into the northern Gulf of Alaska again. Since it's not really sitting on that super highway of weather, it's not going to move with any great speed. It's just going to slowly meander its way across, and that's what we're dealing with right now. So we still have cold air out across the Bering, out across the Gulf of Alaska. We're still dealing with a very spread out and diffuse area of low pressure sitting across the central Gulf. You can see a lot of dry air wrapped in on that system. Out to the east, as usual, we have a decent fetch of moisture working up into southeastern Alaska. There have been a few spotty areas of rain showers today. Not a whole lot to report, though, so not a bad day in southeast at all. But this fetch of moisture will gradually kind of pull back into southeastern Alaska as we get into tonight and tomorrow and the next several days. So things are starting to change there for southeast a little bit more. We're also going to see a slug of this wet weather kind of increase across south central Alaska. There's been areas of showers today, buildup of clouds across the mountains with the daytime heating in some places over 60 degrees. Places like Fairbanks were fairly mild today as well. The west coast saw plenty of sunshine as well as southwest, and you can see some of that moisture also creeping its way back into low pressure across south and western sections of the Bering Sea. Here's another run at the loop, and you can see the moisture working its way northward into western parts of British Columbia and Yukon. We've got a kind of a push of moisture working its way across the Brooks Range, and then a lot of what you're seeing here across the North Slope is fog. A lot of low clouds and fog northward today, and the areas of dense fog that have been offshore will likely creep back onshore as we head into tonight. So don't be surprised to see the visibility drop up across the North Slope, and that trend may continue for the next several days. So the winds won't be very strong across the North Slope at all. Here's a look at the surface map, and low pressure sitting across the Gulf at 989 millibars is just one on the map. There are several. Another wave sitting there west of the Pribilofs at 995 millibars, and a stronger area of low pressure even further out to the west. This first wave is working into a ridge of high pressure that extends down the west coast, and you can see actually a little bit of fog on the Bering Sea coast side of the Alaska Peninsula and almost into Bristol Bay around 3 o'clock this afternoon. As this moves eastward, it's going to start to break apart. It's just going to run into more stable air and have trouble continuing eastward. Out across the Gulf, we also have a weaker area of low pressure that has a lot of dry air wrapped in on the north, west, and even the south side, and for some argument's sake, on the east side too. Another wave still out a little bit further east is what's drawing in the moisture that we were just talking about for southeast and parts of south central. Then we get into very dry weather across the Yukon Valley and low clouds, fog, and even some snow showers for the North Slope. As we get into tonight, that first wave we were watching is really just going to fall apart. It may still create some spotty areas of rain and snow showers. We have a focus of circulation here for low pressure across southeast. That's driving northward with a better chance for rainfall and mainly scattered showers across southeast. Across some parts of the interior, it might be cold enough along the Alaska Range primarily to see some scattered snow showers there, most of that again in the higher terrain. And for the lower terrain in parts of south central, especially around Prince William Sound and the eastern Kenai Peninsula, we're dealing with rain showers. That trend will continue for the next several days. Up north, we're talking about dense fog and scattered snow showers across Prudhoe Bay out toward Kaktovik and southward along the Alcan border. To the west and southern Bering, looking at a 990 millibar low pressure system that's driving eastward with the next wave that will continue working its way eastward as we head into Tuesday. Meanwhile, in the eastern Gulf, there's a possibility for a few thunderstorms to develop, generally offshore and over the marine areas outside of the Clarence Strait and the Dixon Entrance. We would expect a few of those to pop up, maybe on a very case-by-case basis, not terribly widespread, but if you're heading out to sea tomorrow from southern parts of coastal southeast, you want to watch for that. Northern sections of outside of Haines and Skagway and even further north into Yukon, got another wave of low pressure sitting across the western provinces that could stir up a few showers and areas of rain and snow combined. Most of south central is dealing with scattered rain showers there as we head into the daytime. Again, another mild day there. Dry air plentiful across the western and the central Brooks Range, and snow showers and areas of fog should be expected across the North Slope. Southwest, things look pretty dry until you get out offshore, and then rain and snow showers are possible there. You may see some of that mixing in around the Pribilofs as well for Tuesday. And more of the same there for Wednesday. Watch for scattered rain and snow showers throughout the day. On the south and western side, colder air may wrap in, and you could see some snow showers across the central chain. Most likely, though, it will be a rain-snow mix as you head up the Alaska Peninsula and back into south central. We're back into scattered rain showers again as we head into the afternoon. Some of the higher terrain could be looking at snow showers there, and probably more of the same for southeast as low pressures parked just outside of Cross Sound and west of Sitka at 1,007 millibars. That onshore flow ensures that clouds and rainfall will be fairly close by. Meanwhile, the North Slope looking at scattered but light snow showers with periods of poor visibility there, again with that fog bank really not too far off the coast, if it is at all, during your midweek. Temperatures today fairly mild there across the southeastern part of Alaska, mid to upper 40s for many. Sitka was nearly 50 degrees at 4 o'clock. Mid to upper 40s for southern parts of the inner coast as well. 47 around Haines and Skagway, a little bit cooler there. Juneau, pleasantly mild. Yakutat was 45 degrees. Prince William Sound in the lower to mid 40s. 54 in Homer, 47 for Kenai, 54 as well around Anchorage. A beautiful day for South Central. Mid 50s for Talkeetna, a little bit cooler up the road toward Denali. 53 in Healy, 60 in Fairbanks, 52 in Eagle, 40 in Northway, a little bit cooler southward. And up around Fort Yukon, it was 52 this afternoon. Arctic Village reported 43, 28 for Anaktuvuk Pass. Bettles was 51 with the North Slope in the teens and 20s. Kotzebue Sound temperatures in some places made it above freezing, like Kivalina at 32. Kotzebue was only 23. Nome showed 37. Unalakleet was 37 with McGrath almost 60 degrees at 4 o'clock. As you get into Grayling, Sparravon, and Points West, it was in the mid-50s. Bethel was 51. Ammonok was 31 degrees. Southwest into Bristol Bay, we saw temps in the 40s and 50s for King Salmon and Dillingham, with Lake Iliamna at 51. 30s and 40s for the Pribilofs, about the same there for the Alaska Peninsula. Some areas closer to Sandpoint were nearly 50 degrees today. Adak and Atka were both in the mid-40s, and Shemya held out at 37. Now, overnight lows there will drop maybe a degree or so more. Meanwhile, southwestern Alaska should hold just above freezing tonight, with Nunivak Island at 29, St. Lawrence Island at 23, Nome closer to 20, Barrow 8 degrees. The south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range in the teens and 20s tonight. The Middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks may hold just above freezing, with temps there around 35 degrees in some places. South Central and the Susitna Valley, upper 30s for many, all the way down Cook Inlet to almost 40 degrees around Kodiak Island. 30s and 40s for southeast as we start the day tomorrow, with high temperatures once again getting very close to that 50-degree mark, if not above it. South Central in the 40s to low 50s. Kodiak again 50 degrees. Lower 50s for Fairbanks, Ambler, and Bettles. Looking at 40s and 50s tomorrow. Lower 30s as you head up over Anaktuvuk Pass. 20s and 30s for the Arctic coast, with the coldest weather generally west of Barrow out toward Wainwright. Kotzebue Sound in the 30s and 40s. 43 for Nome, 42 in Unalakleet. And southwest, looking at temperatures in the lower 50s around Bethel, about 55 degrees, with the peninsula in the lower to mid-40s. It looks like a fairly mild day for just about everyone involved. Flying weather shows MVFR conditions for most of southeast. There may be some patchy IFR closer to the higher terrain, generally north of Ketchikan and Annette. Most of the northern Gulf Coast will be VFR. There will be some spotty MVFR over the Kenai Mountains there, so watch for that. And north and east of the Talkeetnas, IFR conditions will develop during the day. Look for IFR across the North Slope again with that dense fog possible, and off of southwestern Alaska over Nunivak Island and some of the far western tip of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, also across the central chain. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass we expect to be MVFR. The poor visibility will probably be limited to areas north of the pass and a little bit closer to the coast. So you've got a little room to move there, but watch conditions develop throughout the day and double check before you go. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see MVFR conditions through most of the day. The same extends up around the Horn for the Alaska Range, Rainy Pass, and Windy Pass, all trending in that direction, though Windy Pass may start out at instrument flight rule during the morning hours. Isabel Pass, we also see some morning issues there. Otherwise, MVFR during the afternoon. Mentasta Pass, we expect to see improvements during the day. VFR conditions should develop there. And for Tanita Pass, starting at IFR, we expect improvements toward MVFR conditions by midday. And Portage Pass right now looks to be VFR. Breezy as always, but VFR conditions there. And Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to see MVFR conditions throughout your Tuesday. Now, freezing levels show a different story than just this time last week. You can see a lot of the warmer air building in across the interior of central and western Canada. We have cold air still winning the Yukon and parts of the central and eastern parts of the interior of Alaska, as well as the Alcan, and then warmer air is massing just to the south of the chain. The surface freezing line is also nudging northward, closer to the middle and lower Yukon Valley now, still hugging the coast in southeastern Alaska. It looks like most of Alaska, if you're seeing any warm air aloft, it's only around 2,000 feet generally for the central and western interior and southwestern Alaska, as well as south central. So icing potential, well, there's enough moisture in the air to create a little bit of a threat above 4,000 feet, but it's mostly over the water for the marine areas in the Bering Sea and part of the Alaska Peninsula from Sandpoint westward, Cold Bay and Falls Pass. You might run into some occasional moderate there. Most areas will be dealing with light to isolated moderate, and also north of Juneau, north of Sitka, toward Yakutat, and into places like Whitehorse and east. There's some occasional moderate threat there. Most of that will be light to isolated moderate for the western provinces, and then once again out to sea for the central and eastern Gulf. Most areas in the interior, south central, Kodiak Island, and the North Slope we'll be dealing with very limited icing threats, so we didn't put it on the map today. The jet stream shows high pressure is well north across the Arctic coast, and that is leading to most of our weather being controlled by low pressure in the Gulf as well as out in the Bering Sea. The fastest winds from 115 to 120 knots, pretty much west to east across the northern Pacific, and that is steering most of the active weather out of reach of Alaska at this point. The ridge of high pressure across the western United States really keeping things fairly mild for us as well. At 9,000 feet, 2 areas of low pressure will focus on. One of those across the northern Gulf, driving winds in from the south and west to southeast Alaska, about 10 to 40 knots at the greatest. Light winds across the interior, and that other low pressure system just west of the Pribilofs, steering in westerlies across the Aleutians as high as 60 knots. Most areas, though, dealing with 20 to 25 knot winds. At 3,000 feet, light easterlies moving across the Brooks Range from 5 to as strong as 20 knots. South and westerly winds coming up over southwestern Alaska. Most of the winds over the Gulf also fairly light, and southwesterly winds a little bit stronger for southeast at 35 knots. Again, all this at 3,000 feet. So turbulence, what do we have? Well, not a whole lot of concerns there. We have a few spots below 10,000 feet for southeastern Alaska tomorrow that could reach occasional moderate. Most of it will be light, and most areas for the central and eastern Aleutians below 4,000 feet will experience at least a little bit of chop. Again, a few places could be a little stronger than that. By and large, most conditions for aviation tomorrow are fairly limited, but again, always check before you go. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll take a look at your marine weather here in the Ice Edge update in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
Good evening. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. This evening, our guest, Dee Hansen, has been on the program many times, and she's a familiar sight on the Alaska aviation scene. Welcome back, Dee.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about a rite of spring that gets the aviation folks around Anchorage fired up, the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering.
I think we have it figured out. After ski flying, before float flying, before when everybody's starting to think about getting their airplanes ready to go dust off the cobwebs from the winter, it is a perfect place for people to come and see what's new in technology, purchase that item that they need for their airplane for the summer, and of course say hi to all their friends and meet at the gathering.
So where and when?
This year it's May 2nd and 3rd, the first weekend of May, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 5 on Saturday and 10 to 6 on Sunday, and it's at the FedEx maintenance hangar at Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport.
And give me an idea, how many exhibitors and how many booths and things like that?
We have 245 booths. And then inside with those booths, we usually can fit in about 13 or 14 aircraft inside. Everything from light sport, classics, to new manufactured airplanes, to some of the larger airplanes, you know, like a Caravan that's going, and a G8 Airvan is going inside this year on some new floats.
Great. You also have good speakers, and any idea what those are looking like this
We're
year?
still kind of firming that up, but we do have some good speakers coming. Steve Brown is going to be here with MBAA. Katie Preby with Vice President Communications with AOPA.
Wow.
Paul Claus will be speaking on his adventures in Greenland.
Oh, interesting.
We'll also be having a session on the Matsu frequencies and how Anchorage Center can help you navigate, you know, through the valley and help you out with that. We're still working on it though, but we're putting it together. We're doing something different. It's going to be held outside this year in a tent type venue, moving it from upstairs inside the hangar where acoustics have always been a real challenge. So we're hoping that it's going to be more visible and maybe get some better attendance.
So the raffle, and of course I will try very hard to win this year. What am I going to win?
We are raffling a Dan's aircraft, a Super Cub.
Yeah.
And that's the same airplane we raffled last year. We actually ended up buying back this airplane. It's been on display
At the airport?
for the last winter, yes, in the departure level of Alaska Airlines. Tickets are $50, 5 for $225, and we are moving through raffle tickets this year very quickly. We're selling 7,500 tickets.
So folks ought to get them pretty soon.
Yes,
Okay.
I would say yes.
Any special activities for young people or families? Or
we're going to turn that whole upper mezzanine area into a young aviator's corner.
Oh, nice.
And we're going to have hopefully a scavenger hunt, involve some of the exhibitors in that. They like to participate with the young people in that. And have some coloring, some foam paper glider competitions.
Oh, it sounds
and
fun.
it'll be fun.
So maybe there's some folks who haven't been there before, maybe they're new to Anchorage. Any suggestions on parking or any other advice for show goers?
Carpool if you can. You can park anywhere along Postmark and the Tug Road. Down to the North Terminal, that parking lot is also open. There is a shuttle that is running courtesy of airline support the length of Postmark, so you can hop on at a number of different stops that are marked along the road. So don't let the cars scare you. It is a free admission event. Bring your families. There's something there for everybody. There's good food. There are lots of good food vendors, and come out, hang out for the weekend.
Yeah. And I think you and I were talking, this is the 18th annual?
Yes, 18 years, it's hard to believe. When we were talking earlier, I said I can only remember the different years by the type of classic aircraft that we have on display.
Well, I think it's fair. I'd like to congratulate you because you really are the architect of this thing, and you were there from the very beginning. And it's a wonderful, wonderful tradition, so thank you.
Thank you. It's a real community event, and we couldn't do it without all the support of the different alphabet organizations, along with, of course, FedEx, UPS, and all those other companies that provide free radio and TV. And I mean, it is a community event, and we couldn't do it without everybody's help.
Well, it really is a nice tradition, and I'll remind folks it's May 2nd and 3rd.
May 2nd and 3rd.
FedEx ramp, Ted Stevens International Airport, and it's really a lot of fun. So unfortunately, I won't be here this year, but I always look forward to it. Thank you for putting it together.
You are welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. And remember that Hangar Flying is brought to you by the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media. The website on your screen, please go there. If you're not a member yet or you need to renew for 2015, please do it because we're completely member supported. And until next time, fly safe.
Thanks, Harry. Here's a look at today's Sea Ice Edge update from our Sea Ice Desk team at the Anchorage Weather Forecast Office. You can see out across the northern parts of the YK Delta into Norton Sound, still some at least medium concentrations of, or medium thickness ice out across a large part of the Delta and into Norton Sound. The ice edge itself is still fairly close to St. Paul, but a lot of that is also kind of breaking off as it moves southward into much warmer weather, and there is considerably warmer weather that is slowly drifting northward out across the western Bering Sea coast. Otherwise, Cook Inlet remains clear at this point, as well as Bristol Bay and areas north of Cape Newlinham. So changes to come as it is springtime. Stay tuned for more. As we look at southeast, you can see southerlies developing in the afternoon up to 25 knots, northerlies a little bit further south than that, and then southeasterly winds strengthening tomorrow up to 45 knots. The same goes for areas outside of the Dixon entrance. 9 to 14-foot seas there. Otherwise, northerlies heading south from Yakutat and out of Cross Sound at 25 knots with 7-foot seas. By Wednesday, winds diminish in all areas. More of a southerly flow across the outer coastline, 15 to 20 knots with 10-foot seas outside of the Dixon entrance and Craig and Klawock. Southeast to south winds coming up from Clarence Strait into areas a little bit further north of Frederick Sound, and southerlies for the Lynn Canal, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. Northwesterly winds coming out of Prince William Sound outside of Montague Island. You see 25 knots with an 8-foot sea. Westerlies east of the Barrens at 20 to 25 knots up towards Seward and Resurrection Bay. 10-knot winds were fairly light across northern Cook Inlet. Southwesterlies coming up Cook Inlet from Homer toward Calgan Island, and southwesterlies inside of Shelikof Strait at 20 knots with a 6-foot sea. Those become a little more light and variable by Wednesday. Otherwise, south and easterly winds blowing into the north and western Gulf. Southerlies south of Montague Island at 15 knots. Inside Prince William Sound, 15 knots from the east with a 3-foot sea. Northeasterlies around Anchorage. A variable flow inside of Bristol Bay, 10 knots with a 3-foot sea. South and southeasterly winds crossing the southern Alaska Peninsula at 20 to 25 knots with 6-foot seas on the Bering Sea coast and 7-foot seas on the Pacific coast. Lighter winds coming in from the south and west toward Kodiak Island at 15 knots on Tuesday. Those become westerly with time on Wednesday, 15 to 25 knots for the Pacific with 8 to 11-foot seas and 3 to 4-foot seas for the Bering Sea coast. Winds only around 10 knots for Wednesday. For the Aleutians, a west and southwesterly flow for the central and western chain, 30 to 35 knots, all areas there. 8 to 13 foot seas are expected around AKwx. To the east, a southerly flow around Nikolsky with a 7-foot sea and 25 knots. Southeasterlies north of Unalaska, 20 knots with a 7-foot sea. As we get into Wednesday, you'll notice most areas become a little more westerly with time. A south and westerly flow south of Nikolsky to Atka, otherwise 20 to 25 knots with 15-foot seas around Dutch Harbor at Unalaska, and AKwx looking at 20 knots on either side with 7 to 8-foot seas. Now for the west coast, a northeasterly flow around St. Lawrence Island at 20 knots. Winds remain fairly light out of the Kuskokwim Bay at 15 knots, a 7-foot sea around the Pribilofs with a 15-knot wind on a southeasterly flow. Those winds become light as we head into Wednesday, 10 knots there with a westerly onshore flow coming into the Kuskokwim Bay. 3-foot seas are expected, otherwise northeasterlies coming out of Norton Sound. A 20-knot wind there from the northeast all the way down towards St. Matthew. Stronger winds a little bit further west of the island though, so watch for that. Here's a look at the north slope, but winds will remain light as we head through Tuesday. A very light onshore flow, about 5 knots there, also helping to keep fog in place through the Chukchi Seacoast and north of the Bering Strait. Light easterlies for the Beaufort Seacoast at 10 knots, and by Wednesday you see a light northeasterly wind in all areas, generally 10 to about 15 knots, more of a northerly flow outside of Kotzebue Sound. That also running around 10 knots for Wednesday. Now recapping tonight's weather, low pressures working through southeastern Alaska. As that trends northward, it's going to take some of that moisture we saw in the satellite picture across the eastern Gulf and Pacific Northwest and gradually move that northward. So a better chance for scattered showers as we go into Tuesday and for Wednesday for southeast. Most of that should be pretty light. The mild weather continues for south central, but we also have moisture wrapping into the region. With that, scattered showers will be possible, especially over higher terrain. There's a possibility for some light snow across some of the Alcan border regions, mainly for the higher terrain there. Better chance for dense fog and snow showers up north. Another wave of low pressures crossing the Aleutians and moving into the western Gulf as we head into Tuesday. Watch for spotty storms across coastal areas in southeast. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.